Welcome back to the MMA Museum podcast. This is Miguel Adorati back here with an old school guy. And we throw that term around old school a lot. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to deliver here as I bring to you John the Saint Renken. John, how are you?
Man, I'm doing really good. It's great to see you.
For sure, man. This guy, um, well, how there's going to be a lot of things that we say about John that are going to be like, wow. One of them is this guy got the hook and shoot before I did.
Yeah, that's where I cut my teeth.
so
Besides the one fight before that,
yeah, so how does it start? I know that you had a military background. You're from Kentucky. I think there's was it Fort Bragg? I don't want to get my forts wrong.
Fort Campbell.
Fort
Yeah,
Campbell.
Fort
Okay,
Campbell,
so
Kentucky.
you had a major fort there where you were enlisted, but you were also part of their. They have training and fitness and gyms and things around there. So describe the scene
Sure.
that led to the first hook and shoot.
Yeah, so like for me, I started martial arts when I was younger, 14, 15 years old. Joined the army. I was ranked in the nation in Taekwondo. A lot of guys don't know that because MMA took over, but I was third in the nation in Taekwondo. Joined the army and was actually going to try to compete for the army in Taekwondo. Became an infantryman. Met my squad leader, eventual squad leader, Chuck Luttrell, and he started training me in judo and jiu-jitsu. He was a second degree black belt in judo and was, blue belt level in Brazilian jiu-jitsu type of stuff, right? Got out of the army in 1996, moved to Minnesota to go to college. That's where I met Greg Nelson. But I didn't start training with him right away.
If you're in Minnesota, I think you're going to tell us maybe the story of was it the Wisconsin Valley Tudo?
Yeah, so the Wisconsin Valley Tudo. There was that old school underground forum. You remember that thing?
Yep.
That's where I found out about it. I accepted that fight. I never fought before it. At that point, I was a first degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. I mean, not jiu-jitsu, sorry, taekwondo, and then was playing judo. That was it. That's all I had, And I had done some grappling with my squad leader in the army. And I was like, I had 4 or 5 fights in the army, not real fights, but like pit fights is what we called them back then. Mm-hmm. So I accepted the Valley Tudo match. And when I got there, they moved it from the high school because the high school shut it down. And we fought in a house in 20 below zero weather. I am not kidding. They're affectionately known as the Cold House fights.
Yeah.
And I fought my first fight was against Henry Matamoros.
Yeah, and a tough guy. The Cold House fights. It's funny you mentioned it because that's how Dave Monet refers to him, is strictly as the Cold House fights.
Yep, Dave was there. I knew Dave.
Yeah, you get, Henry was another guy who put in 50 fights. You got your 50 fights. Dave was a UFC champion. There were some good guys fighting in this abandoned house. So describe what goes on. So you guys get to the house. There's no furniture. Are like people, blocking you off in the walls? Are you like literally?
Yeah, they're basically blocking us off the walls and making sure we don't hit the heating radiator. And everybody's in hats and coats and shivering. And just when it was your time to fight, you threw off your coat and your hat and went to the center of the room, and then you fought.
Did you fight with a shirt on at least, or?
I didn't. I wore a pair of tie shorts.
Wow, Jesus Christ! So what was the pay for this thing?
Nothing.
Nothing. So just the experience.
Yeah, I was even with the first time I fought in a hook and shoot. Who did I fight? I fought
Mark Nelson.
Yeah, I fought Mark Nelson. I fought Mark Nelson, and then I fought Frank. And I think I made $50 for that, and I drove 16 hours.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Like I'm telling you, it's different. It was different then, man. You fought
For
because
sure.
you wanted to fight.
Yeah.
You fought because you wanted to prove yourself. Like it wasn't about a paycheck. So
Yeah, like among the other things, I was thinking too. One of the things that if I had to describe John, one of the things would be like he would fight anybody. It didn't, especially back in the day. There was, some people would be like, "Oh, he's 300 pounds." John wasn't a guy that would have ever had a question about that. If it was a go, it was a go. And a lot of times it was a mystery, who your opponent was going to be. Well, so what happened at that first hooker? So you fought in the Cold House fights. That's not exactly like a taste of professional fighting. Now you're going to go to Indiana. Is it because that was more professional? Because
No,
what was
it's
your
because I
thinking?
was addicted. I mean, there was months, man, I fought 6 times in a month.
Yeah,
I loved it. Like there was nothing like it. Um, and I found that one on the underground too. So, I mean, if you go talk to Jeff, man, Jeff thought I was like some neo-Nazi because I had a shaved head and a goatee, and
mm-hmm.
like, I just wanted to fight all the time. Like it was so appealing to me. Um, and Mark Nelson was I think 250. I was like 160, and then Frank Amonfitano was 330 pounds, and I was 160. And I
Yeah.
still should have beat him. I'm still mad about that fight, but I made a real big tactical error fighting that guy that big. So um, and man, I just couldn't get enough of it. I just couldn't get enough.
And you really were learning as you go along too. I remember one of these fights, and these fights, the hook and shoot fights, you have to understand these are kind of like the Cold House fights. These are the legendary fights that happen in the wood paneled room.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it created an interesting situation because I'm a fan. At that point, I went to the very next hook and shoot and started to help Jeff. But at that point, I could hear them, with my earphones. And you had the pride. Did you throw up peanut butter in the middle of a fight?
yeah.
Like,
So that's when I fought Phil Straffolino for the title.
oh,
Uh,
okay,
so my squad leader was my cornerman. That's who you were talking about,
yeah,
Chuck Littrell. And so I'd been eating peanut butter because he kept telling me you don't want a full stomach, you don't want to eat a bunch of food. And that fight with Phil, I don't remember how long it went. It went like 23 minutes,
yeah,
28 minutes, something like that.
great.
About midway through that fight, I think I threw up in my mouth, just the
Yeah,
peanut butter, all the peanut butter. And, there was some interesting stuff about that fight. I felt really strongly about that fight that, because I'm a Christian. So I had prayed before that fight and I felt like I wasn't supposed to hit him. And so I fought that whole fight where he was punching me, but I wouldn't punch back. So it was just jujitsu for me. I wouldn't advise most people to do that, but
yeah.
that ended up doing.
And Phil was unusual for the day because he's a guy that you would underestimate. He's
Yep,
unusual for
but he was tough.
but he was a guy you underestimate, and that's at your own folly. You fought
Yep,
23 minutes with the guy, and that put a hook and shoot title around your waist, didn't it?
that's right. Yeah,
And that's a nice feeling. The payday didn't go up much, I bet.
yeah. I think I made 300 for that one.
Okay, there you go. There you
So
go. Here, the next show is the one that I attended, and this was one. Now we're in 1997.
okay,
So July of 1997, and now you're going to try your hand at I think this was an open hand tournament. You weren't allowed to
yeah,
close.
this was the Pancras where I fought Sean Brockamole and uh, Mario Roberto.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
To talk about that a little because Brockmo was at that point active, but he would be a ref later, and then Mario Roberto was like a black belt that had come up from Brazil that still had that magical mythical quality. So
Yeah. I mean, at that point, man, I was barely a white belt. I've been watching. This is so funny. So I beat Sean with a leg lock, knee bar. Um, and I learned that knee bar watching Masa Funaki on Shudo tapes
okay,
because there was no like back then, man, if you had a blue belt in your gym, you were doing well.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure.
So I was learning by rewatching fights and watching how they entered. So all my leg lock victories for probably the first 3 or 4 years, I learned off watching old Shudo videos or Pancras videos.
And you got quite a rep as a leg lock guy.
Yeah, I've been replaced now, but I think it was like 2006 or something like that. I was the king of leg locks. I had more leg lock victories than anybody. I mean, I know Jonathan Ivey beat me. I know he's got more leg lock victories than I do now, but those were really my victories because I taught him.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Those count for you, my friend. Those count for you.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
get to Jonathan, some of those other guys. Chuck, it's funny that you mentioned that Chuck Luttrell was a judo guy because
yeah,
physically he looked a lot like Keith Raquel. Raquel also was a judo black belt. I don't know if you know
yep,
Keith's story.
yeah,
Um,
I do.
we had George Rivera later held one of the hook and shoot belts. George showed up at Jason DeLucia's academy to do a tryout, like a tough guy wanted to fight and stuff.
Sure.
And he got Raquel as his introduction.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of my really, really, really good friends that was in the army with me fought Keith Raquel because I was like, just get in there. Who cares?
yeah, yeah, it's tough. And I remember Chuck was a guy that um, I think he was a sniper. I think the deal was he couldn't
Yeah, he
break
was
his
a
fingers or
airborne
something.
ranger. Then he was a Green Beret. Was very accomplished in the military.
Yeah, so he's not going to put that at risk, for $300, I guess. So,
Yeah.
so I understand that. But that's one of those guys that I still remember. I was like, wow, I wonder, what that would have been like, or what, how the sport would have progressed from that.
Sure.
But funny, you mentioned Funaki because it's going to be a small world here in a minute when we get to that, but we're not there yet. Um, Now you come into some Monty shows. Now you're starting to spread out a little bit more. Monty at Extreme Challenge. This is number 9. You're fighting Kaz Daniels. Kaz is a guy.
Stripper.
Yeah, we'll tell his story here in a bit. Yeah, Kevin. First of all, tough guy for the early days.
Yeah, it was huge, much bigger than I was.
Yeah.
Um, you know, tough guy. I don't remember how I beat him. I think I armbarred him. I think. Is that what I did?
Let me check it.
I think I armbarred him.
Yeah, submission armbar. Submission
Yep.
armbar.
I
It's
think
interesting.
I think the majority of my victories were by submission. And if I didn't submit you, it usually went to a decision, which, didn't always work out in my favor.
Yeah, yeah. No, you had the Midwest submission game, early on for we're still talking about 1997, 1998, and you're
Yeah,
stringing together leg submissions, arm submissions, and stuff. So there's some definite, groundbreaking stuff that's going on there. Um, so now with Monty, now to talk about Kaz Daniels isn't even his real name. We don't know what his real name is, but it's not Kaz Daniels.
really? I
Yeah.
didn't ever knew that.
Now that's yeah,
Crazy.
that's for sure. Kaz it was his fighting name, like we can call it that. Um,
Okay.
but talk about Brian Dunn is in there. You got to draw with Brian, and that makes sense because Brian's a guy who his resume is comparable to yours. A lot of fights in the early days, submissions and stuff like that. What was that? What do you remember of that fight?
I remember a lot about that fight. So that was supposed to be for the number one seed at 170, I think is what it was. And I watched a couple of VHS tapes on him, and I knew that he guillotined just about everybody that fought him. So under no circumstance was I going to try to take him down. And I actually had good stand up, but my submission game was better at that point than most people I was fighting. Um, and I just decided that fight I was going to stand and bang with him until he took me down. And that worked well in my favor. I kicked him in the head a couple of times. I did a rolling knee bar. And it was back in the day, I beat him. Like, if you go watch that fight, I beat him. But there was no judges back then, so it was a decision. There was no decisions.
So
Um,
they called it a draw.
they called it a draw. But you know, at the end of the day, that was a great fight, man. I enjoyed that fight. He was the first person to break my nose, knocked me unconscious because he kicked me while we were on the ground and knocked me out. He kicked me the second time, it woke me up, and then I don't know that I broke his ankle, but I leg locked and he couldn't walk out of the ring. And I was trying to tear his leg off. Man, I have a lot of respect for that guy. That was a tough fight for both of us, especially at that time. That fight went a full 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's why I wanted to make sure to give Dunn credit too, because he was a guy who was,
He's tough, man.
ahead of
That
his
dude was
time.
tough
You
as
know what I
nails.
mean?
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for him. You know, he was super respectful at the time. And I mean, look, man, this is back in the day when you didn't have to have a cop. You could kick a downed opponent, and he did. Knocked me out. I'm just dumb and wouldn't quit.
Now this next bout, this is an interesting one. You head down to Texas, and this is in January of 1998, and they wind up matching you up with a UFC veteran, Jerry Bolander.
That was so what happened? I was in school, needed money, was trying to get a couple of fights arranged, and Guy Mesger called me and said, "Hey, I want you to fight on the card." I was like, "Okay, I'll fight." He goes, "Well, before you say you'll fight, you need to know who I'm going to put you against." It's like, "Okay." He goes, "It's going to be Jerry Bolander." Jerry Bolander had just come off winning UFC 8.
Yeah.
And I was like, and he was 200, he was all of 205, 210, maybe even 220 at that point. I don't remember. Um, and I was like, "Yeah, man, I'll fight him." You know,
Yep.
so
Yep.
I'm watching
You're
there.
not
He
kidding
beat
around.
me quick, man. He beat me in like, I want to say it was like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, but I got a good kick in on him. But he was just too big, man. That was just, you know, suplexed me. I managed to compose guard, pass my guard, and then armbar.
Yeah.
So
Now, for the time, that was a show. You had the Lions Den guys there. Mesger fought. Williams fought and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a Lions Den show. Um, there was kind of a legendary figure that fought on that with a female fighter named Kathy Brothers, who's a boxer that did an MMA fight here. Do you remember anything about that? What was going on?
I don't. Only thing I remember is it got my picture with Chuck Norris at that time.
Okay,
So
that's cool for sure. So
I
yeah,
can't tell you who else was on that card, man. I don't remember nothing about that card except for I had to fight Jerry Bolander.
yep. The Gasaway brothers from the Midwest, and then it was Eve Edwards was on that
Oh,
card.
okay. Yeah. Because I fought the Gasaway brothers. I fought one of them, Brian.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, very interesting card. One of those side notes, I guess. Guy was doing some promoting there, and
Yeah,
um, was bringing people in to set the Lions Den guys up, I guess.
sure.
So now we're in January of 1998. You just got Jerry Bolander in there, and now you're going back to the Extreme Challenge. Al Buck, Thomas Puckett. You're winning 4-man tournaments here.
Yeah, that was right. So I won that one, and then I won the IFC right after that. I strung off like I don't remember exactly, but it was probably 8 wins, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Now I don't know if these are mixed up here. Now they've got you fighting Henry Matamoros at that Wisconsin Valley Tudo, which would be the Cold House fights. This is that way off on time?
Fight. So that would have been March 1997, which was my first fight. Hook and Shoot was my second fight.
Okay. So yeah, the date on that is wrong on the internet. I'm going by Sherdog. Hey, you fought Ryan Stout too. Ryan was one of those guys that spent some time with the Hammer House. Maybe dab a little bit in roids. Big strong kid.
Very big, strong,
Huh?
very big, strong kid.
Yeah. Now you went 15 minutes with him. That's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
Done 15 minutes, Stout 15 minutes. You just didn't really. You weren't going to quit.
Um. Yeah. So because I'm sure you'll read it, but yeah, man. Unless you put me in an armbar, you weren't. I wasn't stopping. Period. I wasn't going to sacrifice my arm, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not quitting. So, and man, let me tell you about Ryan Stout, man. That dude was his last name is how that dude fought. I had him in a fully extended armbar. He picks me up off the ground and starts head stomping me.
Yeah. Yeah, he
So
was he
I'll
was
leave
jacked
out the
up.
guy's name, but one of the guys that was in Ryan's camp walks up to me and he's like, "Man, you're a really tough fighter." He's like, "I could get you some vitamins that would make you tougher."
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Not a name, but so,
Now from here, you've done a pretty good tour of the Midwest scene for what it was at the time. You know, the hook and shoot was pretty established. Obviously, Monty was pretty established. You know, head down to Texas for a bigger fight with Bolander here, and now you're gonna head into uh, Brian Madden Submission Fighting Championship
yeah,
territory.
he was
What,
a
what
great.
what do you remember about these guys? This was like Jerry Miller, Ventimiglia.
Oh,
Like you fought his
huge.
entire crew.
Yeah, I fought all of them. Scott Vigmilia. Then I fought Jermaine Andre.
Yeah,
And then I fought
Jerry
I
Miller
don't
twice.
yeah, and Miller, who I beat both times, and won the title the second time I fought him. The first time I think they have it as a loss, but I don't. That was not a loss. I beat him. There was something that happened weird with that. I don't remember what it was now, but and then I almost knocked out Vigamilia, and then Andre freaking crushed my soul. But yeah, I fought all of them guys. They were all way bigger than me, every one of them.
Yeah, they were all way bigger and way vitamined up. And Andre was talented too. On top of that, too.
Yeah, yeah. I I think you know back then I just fought because I loved fighting. I think if I had approached that like I approached training the guys that I was training for the military, I I think my record would have been a lot better than what it was.
Yeah, I think at times you may have fallen into just the love of the competition. You know, you kind
Uh,
of so you just
I
start you overcompete
don't
a little
know
bit.
what anybody said about you. Like if they offered me a fight, I took it. Like I
Yeah,
just want to fight, Like I would show up at hook and shoots with my stuff packed, not being on the card, and would fight whoever they gave me.
yeah, yeah. Now in December of 1998, now you've been through the Midwest. Um, ringer here. You've run into some of Fulton's guys at this point. You fought Mark Jake with. You fought Joe Slick.
They gave the decision to him, but I beat Jake with. I'm telling you, I beat Jake with. But you know,
He's another tough guy, but those guys, going into their home territory, sometimes you're asking to get beat if you're
so
not
when
fair.
that stuff started to happen, that's when wrestling you could win a fight just off a takedown, even if you didn't do anything. And he
Yeah.
literally stayed in my guard, and I punched the crap out of him, and they gave the fight to him for a takedown. So
So now you've been putting in the work, and now something happens here, and this is one of those things that I think has got to be bittersweet to John Renken because, everybody talks about Japan and this, that, and the other thing, and you get to go to Japan. You get to fight a legend. The guy that you fight, his next fight is Hickson Gracie, and you didn't get anything near a paycheck for this fight. So talk about your whole
I loved it.
remembrance of the whole thing. And I mean, it's obviously a nice opportunity. You fought Funaki's first MMA full out close fist fight.
Yeah. So first of all, Masa Funaki's a legend, and I knew nobody gave me a chance going into that fight. And my philosophy has always been everybody has a chance. Like I can punch that guy in the face and I could win. Um, you know, so for me, I didn't even mind that I didn't get paid. Um, I just wanted to fight in Japan, and I was joking with everybody before that fight that look, they're going to end up pairing me with Boz Rutan or Ken Shamrock or Masa, and sure enough, that's what I got. You know? So yeah,
So
I
you didn't
mean,
even know you didn't know your opponent until you got to Japan?
I don't think it was quite that late, but I didn't know until probably a week or two out. Like,
Okay.
I really didn't know. But I just knew how the fight game worked. And so I knew I was going to get Suzuki or Funaki or Shamrock or Rutan. I just knew.
And what was Funaki like? What do you remember about the fight?
Great. It was great. Like what a freaking outstanding. Like I was training at the Pancras gyms. My experience with Pancras was amazing. Um, I got listen. I didn't get paid really that well to fight that fight. I don't even think I made $500. I don't remember. It wasn't much,
Mhm.
but I trained at headquarters with Suzuki for a full week. Like I don't care. That was amazing. It's not bittersweet for me. I loved it.
Cool, cool. Now, do you still follow it? Like, do you know? Have you seen Suzuki? Suzuki still does pro wrestling now.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I haven't really followed it. I mean,
Like, if
I
you just
remember bowling with him and just him eating my lunch like I didn't exist. It was a whole nother level. And then you look at like Hicks and walk through them like they don't exist.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely eye opening. So you enjoyed the whole pancrase.
I love
What about the in ring? How the you probably faced a pretty serious Funaki because it's MMA. It's kind of a tryout for
Yep.
the fight of his career. So, what do you remember about the in ring action?
I remember and not understanding this, him not wanting to look me in the eye. And I always meme mugged to everybody. So, and I was you know, I had hoped that it went out longer, like the fight would have went longer, a little bit better. He was just so much better than I was, though. So, he probably could have put me away quicker than he did. Um, I felt like, they stopped the fight too soon because nobody's ever stopped me except for Joe Riggs by punching me. Nobody. Um, I've never been in danger except for Joe Riggs, who put my lights out. Um, so I felt like they stopped it too soon, but he would have beat me anyway. He was just so much better.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment. I mean, it's a good um, measuring stick for yourselves. How did you come home and react to that? Do you come home and train harder, go crazy, or do you
There's
kind
no
of back
real
off a little bit?
hard.
You've been
I
grinding at this point for a long time.
Yeah, I think I trained 2 or 3 days a week. Like it's not like it is now. I was going to school full time, working full time, and I trained 2 or 3 times a week. So,
Yeah. Now,
I mean,
which was the
most
fight?
people
So,
do that.
I was going to ask you somewhere here early. There's an old fight. I don't know if it was maybe who was it who tried to choke you with a wristband?
That was Rangel in San Antonio. And Tito was the ref, and I almost got in a fight with Tito over it.
Yeah, let's tell that story. I remember now. This is the extreme
Yeah.
shootout. So you're going down, and this is Texas, but what
My
you're actually
was,
dealing with here, I think, is pure border town, right?
yeah, it's a border town. So Rangel is from San Antonio, but we fought in McAllen, and Tito was the referee. Rangel was like 260. I was like 170. I beat the brakes off him too. Head kicked him, and then wait, was Rangel? No. Rangel's not the one who took off. Rangel's not the one who choked me with his armband. It was some Mexican wrestler that did that,
Okay.
and I was almost in a fight with Tito in both those fights. Like I couldn't stand Tito at that time.
It's funny. Was it a guy named Luis Guerrero?
Yeah. Luis Guerrero.
It's amazing. Look, we're really in the old school here. This is 1999, and are you saying that was the same day as the Rangel fight, or did you go?
Rangel was like the next fight. It was just another show or two down the road.
Yeah, so maybe
But
I got it right.
yeah, yeah. Both of those guys were way bigger than me. They were heavyweights. I was, light, lightweight, right? Whatever they call it now.
Yeah.
Um, but again, you know, so I
Welcome.
should, Luis, that should have been a disqualification. Um, uh, and they ended up stopping the fight and giving the fight to him.
But
I was like,
what does Tito say to you? Because I mean, at this point,
he's in my face and he's like, you got to do something. I'm like, he's freaking choking me with his wristband, dude. Like it's illegal. And gouged my eye. I came out of the ring. Jeremy Horn was there. Jeremy Horn will, like, if you ever have Jeremy on, like I came out of the ring and had scratch marks across my face, had a bite mark on my chest, was choking me with his freaking wristbands. And Tito's just sitting there. I'm like, you're a jackass, dude. And everybody, because I got in Tito's face about it, and everybody's like, whoa. I'm like, I don't care. He can freaking beat me up. You can fight him again tomorrow. I don't care. Like you need to be a ref if you're going to be a ref.
yeah,
So
no, and that's one of the things where you were always one of those guys where if it was clearly explained to you, you were always by the book. You know what I mean?
yeah, nobody ever, like I never did anything even remotely outlandish. You know, so, but those were good. Man, those were good defining fights for me. Because those guys were so much bigger. Rangel was 250, 260. And, man, I freaking blasted him in the face.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get that? I don't know. I've heard like pro wrestlers talk about working with Andre the Giant, and
Yeah.
they were like, it was great because you could just cut loose 100%, and there's nothing you can do. You know,
Well,
he's
100% was my issue.
on those big guys. You got to cut loose as a little guy, or else
Yeah.
you got to.
Yeah. Yeah. I never had an issue with that. It's just, they can manipulate you more easily. Right. So
Yeah,
like a school child,
yeah.
but even with looking back at it now, even with that guy choking me and all that crazy stuff, I still enjoyed both those fights. I'm a nut. So,
Now, you fought Andy Sanders at the Extreme Challenge. Andy was at one point a Militich guy, and then kind of got on a blacklist with them. Um, but that didn't prevent you from going and fighting in Pride, which is something not everybody gets to do. You got the Pride 9. How did this come about?
uh, his opponent dropped out. They called me 2 weeks before the fight. I just moved from Minneapolis, Minnesota to Clarksville, Tennessee. And they called me and said, you want to fight Soji? And I was like, yeah, I'll fight Soji. Let's go.
Did you remember who the original opponent was?
I don't remember who the original opponent was. Um, that was an amazing time. I had to meet Bas Rutten and I got to spend the night with him. He's hilarious. Um, you know,
If
and
I'm not mistaken, this is uh
2000.
but if it's not the first time you did it, this is kind of the biggest entrance you use with the nickname with the saint and the monk garb and the whole thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right about the time that was when you gave me that name.
Yeah, we used to talk on the phone looking for, and John wanted, we were looking for a good nickname, and he mentioned already that he's got, he's Christian, he's Catholic. I don't want to get it wrong, Christian cat, but he's religious. So, um, once we figured out maybe that'll work, the Saint just worked out perfect, and it actually, I think it did good for you. People remembered you.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the Japanese didn't have a word for that, so that's where fighting preacher came from. So they didn't have a word for the saint, so they called me the fighting preacher.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And I remember Shoji, this was kind of a weird fight because I think he put you down, you're on your back, and you were kind of like asking him to let you back up, and he wouldn't commit to hitting you. So you kind of like were facing each other for a good little bit. Like it was almost like a misunderstanding, like you needed a translator. Well, what do you remember about that interaction?
He didn't want to stand with me because I need him in the face. I think they didn't think it was going to be a hard fight. And when I need him in the face, you could hear Bas Rutten go, "Whoa, somebody came to fight," you know. And I was going to head off. So he did not want to stand back up with me, but I had already escaped his mount one time at that point. So I think that he was a little bit taken aback, like taken off guard. So I mean, I don't know. I didn't understand anything he said. That's just me guessing.
Yeah, yeah, and it was it was a weird fight, obviously, because of the quietness of the arena and everything like
Oh,
that. And you
that
had the
was, like I enjoyed that. It was so cool.
do you
30,000.
remember do you remember being hassled for drug tests?
I did have to take a drug test, but I don't remember them. Like it was just like, hey, you got to take a drug test, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it seemed inappropriate. I don't like it didn't seem like everybody's going for drug tests. You got to go. It seemed like all of a sudden it was like you had to go, and we just went to an average hospital and sat there for a couple hours. Uh, you know, every
Yeah,
experience in Japan is kind of cool. So even in the hospital for a few hours, you're like, it's not bad. And then I remember you kind of went out and we've screwed up and you were trying to buy like a dolphin, and I don't know how we screwed up, but it was you thought you were spending $30 and we wound up spending $300 on a dolphin
yeah,
instead.
yeah. It was like, what the heck? Yeah, I remember that, man. That was funny. And the barbecue we had after that was amazing.
Yeah, yeah, they treated you well, and obviously Pride, was Pride. The cool thing there too was at the hotel afterwards, going to just lunch or breakfast and
Yeah,
seeing like the whole room full of people and stuff.
yeah. And
So
then
now,
where that kid caught on fire, right? That happened at my event.
um, was it that event? Why was I there? Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Joel
they
Talavera
did.
and
They
Matt
did the
Serra were the
fireworks
first fight,
caught on.
and yeah, that was one of those things where it's like you could smell burnt flesh in the audience.
Yeah,
Um, what do you remember about all that?
I don't because I was backstage, and I just remember they gave me a schedule and said, like, even if the fights end early or go late, this is when you'll fight. We have it down to a science. And then that all changed because that kid caught on fire. And I didn't know about it until after the fact. So,
Okay.
it, you know, I was just like, what? Like, did you get rid of the fireworks? I don't want to walk out there.
Yeah, yeah. It was weird because where I was, one of the guys, there was a Dutch guy, Willie Peters, who fought. I think he fought.
Yeah.
I think he fought Tom Erickson, which is a tough order if everything is okay. But he's got to follow out from the side where the guy got burnt. He's watching paramedics work on him and stuff, and has to go out and face Tom Erickson. So definitely a weird pride,
That
kind of like
was
the kind of
go.
thing you kind of wish they had you back one more time.
Yep. Yeah, it was weird.
Now you settle back in to back to hook and shoot, and you have some fights in between. You go to Texas, you fight Shannon Rich. You fought a guy named Eric Hill, who I think has passed away. Um, but
Really, that was
then you
Florida.
then you go ahead.
That was down in Florida. I didn't know he passed.
Yeah, did he do UFC? Maybe I'm mixing him up because
No, I
sometimes.
don't think he did UFC. Um, I just remember that was a card out of the blue in Florida.
Okay, yep. I think I may be mixing him up with another person with the last name of Hill. Thank God. But so you had a couple fights, but then you settle back into hook and shoot where you've held the title, and now you get into like a rivalry with Scott Hensey. Talk about that because when Jeff, when Indiana ran, we had big shows, but when we ran littler shows like this, Jeff, a lot of times went all out on production and things like that. And that rivalry was something that you guys both worked on. I think Hensey is a good
Yeah.
rival for you.
Yeah. So our first fight, I beat him pretty handily. Uh, Decision. And what started the rivalry was I did not know that when he did his pose that he was memorializing a friend of his that died. I had no clue.
Okay.
And I wouldn't know that until after we fought the second time. And we got in a fight, man. Like we amped it up. We acted a little bit like we weren't really fighting at that point, but we did a like promo for the show and we got in a fight over it, right? And then we had that second fight, and that's when I found out, and I went over and apologized to him. I think Scott's a great guy. It was a great rivalry for us and Hook and Shoot. but I was really not happy when I found out what that stood for, because I would have never done that if I would have known that. And so I went and apologized to him, and now we talk. He goes hiking, and we've shared some of the same stuff with the outdoors and stuff. Now he's a great guy.
Yeah, yeah. I like Scott a lot, and that's why I think it was a good rivalry because it was the kind of thing where Scott was from Indiana and he was from Evansville, but he showed up after you, so it was definitely like who's the king of hook and shoot kind of thing, and it was
I
fun
think
to
that
watch.
unequivocally.
So
So
now comes another one of those historic things that only happened once, and this is Brazil's IVC tournament, run by Sergio Bottarelli. At this point in
16
2000,
man tournament.
yeah, it's a 16-man tournament. At this point, though, Bottarelli's kind of running on his last legs in Brazil in terms of
Right.
sponsorship. They haven't gotten support from TV and things like that. So, for economic reasons, they run the show in Venezuela. And you get the call here. And I think there were definitely some killers in this tournament. And Alex Stiebling won it. Why don't you take us through your complete memories of this IVC 14 in Venezuela?
Yeah, I got a call on Thursday night that somebody dropped out or their visa didn't get approved or whatever. And they said, "Can you fly in tomorrow?" And I'm like, I can't just like leave work and fly in tomorrow. And they said, "We'll pay you extra." And I was like, "Okay, I'll fly in tomorrow." They flew me in. And then I fought that 16-man tournament on Saturday, which was, my first fight was against Jefferson Tank Silva. And that's the one where he dislocated my jaw. The ref stopped the fight. I didn't want the fight to stop. And then a bunch of people dropped out of the tournament in the tournament, so they let me come back in the tournament in some weird quasi like survivor rule. And then I fought one of the cyborgs. Uh,
Angelo Araujo.
yeah. So I had a great time at that tournament until I got back to the US. When I got back to the US, I flew into Miami. I missed my flight because they pulled all my baggage and pulled me into security because the dog sniffed cocaine. And I'd never done cocaine. I don't do drugs. And they just freaking raked me over the coals. And because I was coming from Venezuela, this is post 9/11. I had two one-way flights. Dude, every red flag in the US government was dinging.
Yeah. How long
So
did they keep you?
like 8 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
And then they
Uh,
put me on a flight and sent me home. So because I mean I didn't have nothing. They cut my shoes open. I mean everything.
where was this in Miami?
Miami.
Wow. That's amazing. Have you ever heard Stiebling's story?
Well, yeah. So I brought Steepling into the army and had him starting to train the army. So Steepling and I spent some real good time together.
Okay, cool, cool, good, good. And he's a good guy, a hard training guy too. He
Oh, you great guy.
he's I interviewed him and he's a few years sober.
Yeah,
So
for him.
he remembers that story. He goes, Miguel, I just won the tournament. He'd gone out and partied. You know what I mean? He goes,
Yeah.
I got blue hair. I'm making a spectacle in the airport. You know what I mean? It's just not smart anymore. But they pulled him off the airplane, made him open his bag because something was being set off there, and it was actually the belt that he had won. So they
Oh,
let him go. But yeah, everybody's got adventure stories. You went with Ivy too. Were you kind of babysitting Ivy, or
I
what?
wasn't babysitting. He fought in the tournament too. Um, you know, so I don't remember if we were still training together at this point, but he was in the card. It was an open weight card. So
Yeah, yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, did you get a chance to enjoy anything in Venezuela, or was it dangerous?
Oh no. Because I had to return to work on Monday. So I flew in, flew out.
Were you like going? Were you going to the hotel and just like lock yourself in? Because
Yeah, I just hung out in the hotel. I didn't go nowhere. And plus, they were still in the middle of their Revolutionary War. Like, that
Yeah,
place
yeah,
was not safe.
yeah. It wasn't safe. Part of Steveling's story is he was with some girl, and he actually they had a limo that they were getting around in. He gets in the limo with her, and by luck grabs the it was the old school like locks, and he
Yeah,
grabs it because they tried to lock him in the limo, and he wound up jumping out of the limo while it was moving at some point. So he
yeah.
has a he has
I remember
a
the story.
Venezuela story.
Yeah, I remember that part. Yeah, because he actually messed his knee up doing that. I remember that.
Yeah, and that's where you got to give John credit. Yeah, John's smart enough to not get involved in crap like that.
Yeah, I was not doing all that jazz, bro. Had a wife, kid. Oh, I don't think Samuel was born yet when I took that one, but it was soon after that my firstborn was born.
Yeah. Now the next set of fights here is all against guys that would be in UFC, and they're
Yeah,
all hook and shoot cards. So at this point, you're holding up the main events of that organization.
yeah.
Uh, you fought Wisniewski, Salivary, Curtis Stout. What do you remember about that series of fights?
So I was injured when I fought Salivary. I just didn't want to give up the title. I didn't. I don't know why. Jeff said, that they were going to strip me if I couldn't fight, and so I decided to fight injured. I didn't train one day for that fight. I blew an ankle on a trail run before I signed. Before I really started training for it, and dude, Ivan just crushed my soul. I thought he broke a rib. Winooski, I literally took that fight on 5 minutes notice. What a great kid. You know, just again was not very knowledgeable in leg locks at the time, and so I snuck one out. And Curtis, I trained the hardest I trained my entire career for that fight. And what I told everybody I'm going to knock him out. And everybody was like, why are you going to stand with him? Your jiu-jitsu's better. I'm like, I'm going to knock him out. I always felt like people disrespected my stand-up game. And I had not great, not like the guys now. But I mean, for back in the day, I felt like I had a good stand-up game and I had a chin. Joe Riggs is the only person ever who put me out. So,
No shame
um,
in that. I mean, Riggs put a lot of people out.
yeah. So, you know, um, so I was going to go out and stand and bang until I beat him. So
Yep. Now we get kind of like a Japanese tease again in your career here as we're getting towards the end here. But first, you fight in Mexico against Edwin Aguilar. Now, Edwin has a weird asterisk on his career, and that is around this time, Pride did these California tryouts. And Edwin was a guy that, they had, best knockout or best submission or best whatever. And this guy won best build. So he was kind of like a guy that people were like, oh, he's got a body, but can he fight? And he actually is a pretty
he's
mean little
soccer kicked me,
too.
man. Freaking clean my chrome. And I wasn't really used to that, because there was nowhere that was allowing soccer kicks anymore. And I shot a takedown and he stuffed the takedown. So I went to turtle to then pull guard and I was like, ooh, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, after that, now we're in February of 2003. It looks like you took a year off or took 6, 7 months off there, and you get a call to go to Shudo in Corkin Hall back to Japan, and you fight another guy. This guy might have more
Sakurai.
experience than you.
Yeah, Sakurai, right?
Yeah, Ryuta Sakurai.
Yeah. So he knocked me out and I recovered. Um, Man, that guy was such a freaking beast. Um, it didn't finish the fight, but he ended up getting me into Kimura. Um, and I head kicked him and he picked me up off my head kick and slammed me.
Jeez.
Yeah, dude, that guy was an animal. Um, that was a fun time too, man. I got to train with the Shudo guys. I was there for a full month. That was an amazing experience.
Oh, that is cool. So you spent a month. Who's the guy that impressed you with Shudo? Who was taking care of you there?
Mock Sakurai.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Wow.
so that's the gym I trained at for that whole month.
Okay, that's awesome.
It was
That's
amazing.
now. You come back to the States. Now we can talk about you. You go down. I think it's in New Mexico or Arizona. This is that Joe Riggs fight, and Joe just got you quick. Is that what happened?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. So people don't understand what the fight game used to be like back then. I had about a month's notice for fighting Joe, but Joe knew for 4 months he was fighting me. So,
Yeah.
I walked out, and so he drilled my right head kick to his right hook because he's southpaw. He put my lights out, dude. And it was so funny. I remember looking at the ref. The refs hold me, and I go, "Oh, so that's what a knockout's like."
took to almost the end of the career. Now, I think I was the matchmaker for this event, which is Strasser's show up in Milwaukee, where you did it looks like it's an 8-man tournament.
8-man tournament. They screwed me. Yeah, I should have been. So the first match, I beat that kid, and I had him in a triangle, had him in an armbar. I mean, I beat him in every angle. He just shot takedowns, never punched me the entire fight. They gave the decision to him. This is another one of those weird ones. I came back and I fought Brian,
Ebersol.
Herbisol, and beat the crap out of him. Dude, like I I beat the crap out of him for 2 rounds, and then he illegally, not like on purpose. I don't think he did it on purpose, but he elbowed me in the back of the head, and knocked me out. So I got a 5-minute recovery time, and then came back and just held out in the third round. So by that point, I had fought for 30 minutes total, and Nick the Goat Thompson had fought for 2 minutes. And I took that fight on 24 hours notice.
And you were, Ebersol knocked you out with the illegal elbow, so it's questionable whether he should have been allowed in there. But I guess this was the Wild West stuff. How'd you feel with Nick? What happened with the Nick fight?
Oh, it was over pretty quick. So I actually always felt like I had the longer reach. Nick had way longer reach than me. Right cross, broke my nose. And I don't remember how he beat me. I don't remember if he choked me or armbarred me. I don't remember. He did something. I really don't remember. How did that one end?
It says TKO, so
Yeah,
I'm not sure there.
yeah. I mean, he beat me legit, man. I was freaking exhausted.
Now at this point, Thompson, we'll call him. He's a different generation because he's going to be younger than you.
Yeah, he was
Ebersol's
good.
another guy like an old dog like you and stuff like that. But are you starting to get the feeling that this is getting harder and harder to do with work and the other stuff, and that you're not a pro?
No. So it was really so I felt like I could have been competitive with those guys for another couple of years for sure. But what ended up doing it for me was I had my second son, and then the military offered me a contract that was just frankly too much money to like. I just started thinking about it. I'm like, man, I've got to look after my family. You don't really make great money at that point in fighting. And so I think I retired in 2007 or 2008. I don't remember. It was
Yeah.
one of those two.
Yeah, let me ask you, what was the most you made throughout your fight? You fought almost
Pride. Pride was 4,000 plus incidentals plus travel. That was the
and that was
most.
fighting Shoji and Pride.
Yeah.
So $4,000. That's if you're lucky, you paid the rent for a month or two. You know what I mean? So really,
Yeah.
really, what we have here is a situation where you paid dues, and you got your memories, and you got good times, great stories. Thank you for
Well,
sharing. but
Yeah.
you had to move on and get your life together still. You know, you had to go out and do something for
So,
real because you didn't have the spoils of war here.
yeah, but see, I think it's because of all that stuff that I did. It landed me the military contract that I had for 20 years. Because there was nobody doing what we were doing then. It was so outlandish, right? Like, um, and I think it's also more than that too, because I think that, I ran a successful gym. I trained champions. The state of Tennessee, I was the first person to do MMA in Tennessee, like to do official shows. This is before Rampage, before Mike Pyle. Like all those things really happened because I started MMA in Tennessee. And, you know, I think some people forget about that. I brought the UFC to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And sometimes I think people forget about that stuff, but I, I look at it a little bit differently. I think everything that I've accomplished is really because I spent that time going to the cage and fighting whoever I would put in front of me.
Yeah,
It definitely helps me in my current job. So
yeah, yeah. No, I think that you polished uh, an ability to deal instinctually with whatever's in front of you, and
yeah,
and I know that that's a little bit of what you do. Tell people what you're into now, what your career is. I know you do
uh,
speaking and
yeah. So for 20 years, I was training special forces how to shoot and fight. Like I would show them how to combine the two. I wasn't doing the shooting training, but how to go from gun to fighting. And then COVID ended that, and now I'm a professional sales and leadership and mindset coach. So I do a lot of mindset work. And man, I think a lot of that mindset comes out of deciding back in the day when there was no rules. I'm going to get in the cage and see what happens. So it's allowed me to be really successful in a lot of different areas.
for sure. Now you said you'd only been you got knocked out once. That's a real unique thing too. And the fact that you're speaking in public and stuff. How are you feeling with the CTE and things like that? Are you? It looks like you
Yeah, I mean,
do better than most.
yeah, I mean, you got to remember it was different back then, man. There wasn't a ton of really quality strikers, right? So, like, I think I probably took a little more head abuse than I wanted,
Yeah,
because I was dumb. Like, I didn't care about getting punched. Uh, you know, so I think it's different now. I think that guys are such more competent and capable strikers that I think they have to really be careful now. But I don't feel like I've suffered. Matter of fact, I don't really know any of the from my generation of guys that are suffering from the head trauma stuff.
yeah.
So
There's a few guys out there that have made been public. One of the big ones is Spencer Fisher.
okay, yeah,
Remember
yeah,
Spencer?
but he came after me though. He was a
Yeah,
generation after, and I know Gary Goodrich had problems, but there was Gary was fighting really big guys a lot, and he was purely a striker. So they got in the center of the ring, and they just threw blows, man. So I mean, I know there's a couple,
yeah.
um,
Now,
but
but I'm just saying, good for you, man, because like you were a guy, you weren't afraid to get hit. You would take a shot to give a shot, and it's not that now people don't fight like that because people say, oh, that, but you sort of avoiding really getting tagged, except maybe by Riggs, which is a
yeah,
testament. Do you
yeah,
remember getting beat up by somebody? Who stands out as the hardest hitter?
Jefferson Tank Silva
Okay.
dislocated my jaw, man. But I wanted more of him. I didn't want to quit. I put my jaw back in place in the ring and was yelling at the ref for stopping the fight. I mean, and when Scott and I fought that second time, when he dropped me out of the ring, that knocked me out too. So I've been knocked out a few times, but it the only time it ever stopped me was Joe Riggs.
Mhm.
Because all the other times, for some reason, there was something that would allow me to be able to continue. Like Brian Dunn knocked me out and then woke me back up with his second shot. When Scott threw us out of the ring, right? So there were always for some reason, And I was dumb enough to I would have kept fighting, like wouldn't
Yeah.
have bothered me at all.
Yeah, no, that was there was not much negotiation with you, Renken. You know, it's like we're gonna do this,
Mm-mm.
we're gonna do it. And it was nice too because you bought guys and we were able to present. I mean, we were more fair show than most at the time, I think.
I
So
love, yeah,
so for sure. So talk about some of the guys that you trained with in later years and stuff.
man. I've gotten to train with so many great guys. You know, who would have? So one of my really 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 good friends, and he's not a great like he's not known in MMA at all, but Ray Casillas down in Nashville. I got to train with Mike Pyle. I got to train with Eddie Bravo. I got to train with Alan Belcher before his eye injury. I got to train with Randy Couture. I mean, so I really did get a plethora of people to train with. And I was doing stuff where, Suzuki, that was memorable to me. Sakurai was memorable to me. Then I got to go to Thailand and train at Fairtech Muay Thai camp and got to train with Anjan Chai, 7-time world Muay Thai champion. Man, there were so many great people that I got to train with. That I got Eric Paulson, Brad Kohler, Dave Benet,
Greg Nelson.
and you know,
Yeah.
like Sean Shirk. Sean Shirk, I still talk to Sean. Sean's one of my heroes. So there's just so many great people. Um, man, just a lot of great people.
Now in Suzuki's case, we're creating a like a personality of some of the Japanese guys. Was Suzuki mean?
Uh, so a lot of people said Suzuki was mean, and he would do things to cause pain, but I don't know that it was that he was mean or he just came out of catch as catch can. The pro wrestling in Japan at the time. Um, I mean, there was times, man, he grinded on me pretty hard, and it's probably not what you would have done in America, but and I was in his house playing by his rules, so you
So
know,
nothing that set itself apart. You're okay with it.
yeah, like I can tell you honestly, man, I only had a couple of issues with people over my whole career. The guy down in McAllen that was cheating and biting and eye gouging and all that stuff. But outside of that, I don't think I had an issue with nobody else.
Okay.
You know, I had an issue with Scott initially, but once I realized that that was because of me, because I did something that I didn't understand, once that was over, it was over. Um, mm, yeah,
Now you ran off a bunch of legends there. How about who's the guy who wowed you like that
Eric,
one move? Hmm?
Eric,
Paulson?
absolutely. That dude was crazy, crazy.
Yeah.
Um, that dude could tap you with 57 different submissions before you knew what was happening.
Yeah.
Great friend. I still keep in touch with him. But really great, Eric Paulson. I spent 2 weeks in LA with him. That's when I started doing more chicken wings, because of what he did to me out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Paulson is one of those, if possible, he's like a forefather for you. Like he's the generation
Yes.
before and
Yeah,
just
he's
a
really
brilliant technician.
yeah. And he's amazing, man. What an amazing guy. And and then I got to train with Jeremy, I got to train with Pat, like all those guys, like I knew all those guys, man. So there's a lot in there.
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you watch it still? Do you watch the UFC?
I haven't really in a long time, only because I've got kids in wrestling, and I'm the assistant wrestling coach, and I'm running business. I miss it though, man. Like, uh, it changed my life, and when I made that decision to retire, I actually was depressed for a couple of years over it.
Yeah.
Really bothered me, and then I picked up. So I was sitting. This is 2012ish. So I've been retired for about 3 years, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. And the Army sent me to a mental agility school, like sports psychology for coaching. And I was sitting there, and the instructor was like, "Hey, tell me some of your goals." I was like, "Well, I've really done everything I wanted to do, man. I don't have any goals left." And they're like, "Well, this is a course about mindset and goals, and so if you don't have goals by tomorrow morning, we're going to kick you out of the course." I was like, "What? All right." So I went back to the hotel room, and a Groupon popped up on my phone. Climbed the most dangerous mountain in Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's when I started climbing mountains.
Okay. And that's cool. I saw part of your bio and stuff that, man, that's just an amazing story. And it's great to see you. I think every fighter at some point feels that depression or that moment of like, and it really is a personal. How long are you going to let it last? How long, you're
Yeah,
going to let it take 10 years of your life? You're going to let it take 4 years of your life? In your case, it becomes a good story. And I'm really pumped up about that because,
yeah,
when I'm a bit of a historian nowadays, and you look at boxing, and boxing is full of tragedies. And,
yeah.
we've got some tragedies here. There are guys doing life in jail and stuff like that, but we're avoiding some of the tragedies of people being bitter and people, even like you, if you were bitter, there's nobody who could say he had no reason to be bitter. He made 4 grand for his biggest fight, but you're not, and that's just a testament to you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I think my motivation in fighting was different too from the start. Like I just wanted to fight. Like it
Yeah.
just was so primal back then. There was no official sport. There was no, like, half the time we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
So
And
let's go back to as we're wrapping up here because I've taken up a lot of your time, but let's go back to one of the early days. So now we're in the hook and shoot, and you're coming up from Tennessee, and now you're the veteran guy there. You held a belt early and stuff like that, and you're starting to bring up guys. Ivy was one. Tommy Graham was another guy.
yeah,
Tommy passed away, but Tommy held the hook and shoot belt and stuff. So now, how did that feel? Like you were bringing up like a crew of guys where you were like the guy, you were like the team that everybody was like, oh God, the pros showed up. Like even in the
yeah,
early days. Talk about
yeah,
those early guys, because Tommy was a bad
yeah,
boy, and Ivy too.
yeah. So, and I did this with my kids program too. One of the things that I told them all the time, I don't care if you win or lose. I care that you give it everything you got. Like there's no quitting. There's no, like, and it was crazy back in the day, man, because we were required to bring a towel, but I told all my guys, if you don't quit, I'm not throwing the towel. So like unless you were unconscious or something like that, right? And man, there was just so many great guys, Wes Bacher and Jerome Labanner, right? Jerome fought that great fight against Frank Mir when
Yeah.
nobody knew who Frank Mir was. Nobody gave my guys even a freaking slick of a chance. And every time, man, those guys came up, and on their worst day in the gym, that was easy day to my guys because we were preparing for war.
Yeah.
And
Jerome
it was a different
Jerome is
different
a guy that's
mentality.
dear to my heart because he was a big old boy, military guy, right? So
Yeah.
I was Mr. Miguel. He would call me
Yep.
Mr. Miguel. And but he had some interesting story. Like on a side note, I think he stole Dave Benet's car at one point.
That was after he left me.
Yeah. So he had his ups and downs, but
Yeah.
yeah, Jerome was a guy that came up through your school. He's another guy took a fight in hook and shoot against Jeremy Horn on 30 minutes notice, and Horn spent the rest of the afternoon. He had a spoon that he was freezing to keep the swelling down because Jerome popped him one. So for sure, John, the old hook and shoot definitely owes you like a debt of gratitude, not only for yourself but for the pedigree of the guys that you brought up and stuff, the way you carried yourself. It gave people a hint that this was more than just a joke, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it a lot. Great walking down memory lane, John.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. It caused me to. And listen. Here's the bottom line. The lesson that everybody can take from this is if you just decide to do it, who cares what anybody thinks? Just do it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did. And that's what I still do.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Wes Bockert. I did 2 weeks ago. I interviewed Tyrone Roberts, who fought Wes.
Yeah.
That was one of those. You know, Wes is a tough guy, but Tyrone was a couple of levels above, and you know, I felt like I did Bockert wrong. So I'm glad. You know, maybe if he hears this, he knows that I still carry a little bit of weight on that man because I think he was a
He
better
probably
fighter
does.
than that.
He's coaching wrestling in Alaska.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good to hear, man. Well, John, thank you very much for catching up. And I'll let you
Um,
know. I'll send you some links when this is up, okay?
Awesome. Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you very
brother.
much, man. Great catching up.